Hi, and welcome to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 185. And today's date is October 10th, 2013. And the title of this episode is Will the Government Sabotage the Truckers' Ride for the Constitution? And we all understand that the truckers are heading down to D.C., and they're expecting to be about, 10,000 trucks or so. Which are going to be surrounding Washington. And what has happened now, the bikers decided to join them down in D.C. The veterans decided to join the bikers and the truckers, and everyday people who are protesting the closing of national monuments, memorials, national parks are also heading down to Washington, D.C., and we're going to see a lot of people protesting. And really, this is a huge potential false flag, because all the government has to do is mix another truck into the mix, which wouldn't be a trucker, which would be an agent, and they could have a bomb. They could do something with the veterans. They could mix a couple of people up who have weapons and start shooting, and this could get out of control. And this is a perfect opportunity for the government to do something. And this is why the title is about sabotage, because this is starting tomorrow. The truckers are going to be arriving in D.C., and all throughout the weekend we are going to see protests. But let's get into the economic collapse news right now. And we do understand that out in Europe, and I discussed this in many other reports and yesterday, and I see it's all over the internet, that the poverty level is at an all-time high in European countries. The Greek unemployment has gone up again. They're reaching, since July, another 1.37 million people, and the unemployment is just continually skyrocketing out in that area. Because what is happening is this debt fix, this bailout fix that they're doing, just adds more debt. It does nothing else. It just adds the problem on top of another problem on top of another problem. And this is not a solution. This is a temporary, let's push this to the side and no one will complain about it, and we'll deal with it when it comes up again. And this is what's happening out in Europe, in Greece and Cyprus, Portugal, Spain, France, and the same thing's happening here in the United States. Nothing has been fixed here. Things are just actually getting worse. The debt continually to rise, and this is not going to end well. And Rasmussen has done a poll, and 83% of Americans say that we are heading in the wrong direction. And let me tell you, I feel like we're heading in the wrong direction, because we are. This is not the direction we need to be headed in. Now, we understand when President Obama came into office in 2008, the national debt was around $10.6 trillion, and right now the national debt is approaching $17 trillion. So from the time he took office to now, it went up approximately $7 trillion. And if we keep the average of 1.28 trillion each year, by the time he leaves office, the national debt will be at 20 trillion. And that's the debt that they're reporting to us, but there are other reports saying that the actual national debt is around $200 trillion when you add everything in. But if we just use the numbers of 10.6 when he came into office, 20 trillion when he leaves office, this is so much debt. There is so much interest on this debt. If the rates rise, the government would not be able to make these payments right now, and they would end up borrowing more to make those payments, and the debt would triple, quadruple, until it cannot be sustained. And we're seeing this right now, and them discussing the debt ceiling and raising it, it doesn't matter. I saw it today. They're out there saying that if we raise it temporarily for the next 6 weeks, we'll revisit it. The same thing's going to happen. There is no difference. And Senator Tom Coburn said we are 30 trillion in the hole plus another 17 trillion in debt. Wouldn't it be smart if we started addressing the problem before we blankly allow an increase in the level of the credit card? And I completely agree. No one is discussing the problem because they don't have a solution, and the solution would hurt, and that is called a major, major collapse at this point, and nobody wants to pull the trigger on that. They rather have this be blamed on someone else or another country, where the blame is not on the Republicans, it is not on the Democrats, it is not on the president, it's not on the Fed, and this is what they're going to end up doing. They're going to shift the blame somewhere else because no one is man enough to suck it up and say we have a major problem, we have to change. This president and all other presidents, none of them were man enough to stand up to the Fed, central bankers, and say enough is enough. Now, Jack Lew, the Treasury Secretary, is out there saying that that Social Security payments are at risk, and if we hit the debt ceiling, people are not going to get their Social Security payments. Well, I hate to say this, Social Security is a trust. Every single person pays into this, and the money is supposedly invested for the people that are going to retire, and then this money is then paid out to them. But what has happened is during the Clinton administration, they took the Social Security money, and that's why they were saying that we're in the black now and everything seems good. They took the money and they replaced it with Treasury bonds, and they started giving everyone refunds from the Social Security fund. And this is what the Jack Lew is saying right now, is that there's no money in Social Security at all, and if we can't borrow to hand this out anymore, and people will not get their payments. But we trusted the government to handle the money, keep it in a trust fund for everyone, and guess what they did? They robbed Social Security. They are robbing the pensions right now to keep the government open, and they are not to be trusted with any of the people's money at this point. They cannot handle this. Okay. Now, in my other reports, I've reported on the job, the unemployment, the jobless claims, and I discussed that it was all manipulated, and people. Back in 1994, they manipulated the calculation, so every time we see the unemployment drop, it's basically they're counting those people who are no longer looking for work. They keep massaging the data, manipulating the numbers to make it look good, because their plan at the time was to show the economy was getting better. And we saw this going through the summer. We saw Obama out there, and he was telling us that the housing was recovering. We saw the unemployment coming down. They were saying that retail was doing fantastically and everything was looking great. And they thought all of this was going to come together with the event in Syria to get us into war and finally blame this entire war and them using a false flag event on the U.S. to say they're the ones who collapsed the economy, and this is why we can't taper at this point. And what happened was that event didn't happen. So the Fed could not taper, and all this propaganda is now falling apart. And what we're seeing now today, initial jobless claims spiked at 66,000 this week, and they're all out there saying that, the reason why jobless claims are up is because the government furloughs, they're applying for unemployment, and the numbers are going up. And also we have to look back at California. They had some glitches in their systems, and this is why we're seeing this right now. And what is really happening is that they need to continually manipulate the numbers. Yes, I'm sure the government shutdown added to this, but I don't understand them applying for unemployment when they're getting all their back pay and they're going to get paid twice now. It makes no sense. But we are seeing that they're losing control of keeping the propaganda that the economy is getting better, because we do understand that the housing market is starting to decline now. And they're already making references that this shutdown is going to hurt the economy. The longer it goes, the worse it will be. And we're starting to see housing decline, and we're starting to see retail sales to suffer because the retailers can't get their numbers from the government, and this is going to hurt them. And they're making tons and tons of excuses. But what have we seen? We've seen layoff after layoff after layoff. We saw Wells Fargo laying off thousands of people, JP Morgan laying off thousands of people, Citibank, Bank of America. We saw Siemens laying off people. We see Teva, the drug company, is now laying off 5,000 employees. Capital One, 200. Target, 150. Chesapeake Energy, 1,200. There are tons of layoffs going on right now. I also, in my previous reports, I had a discussion on office space. That office space is starting to decline, where there's a lot of office space now empty, because what's happening is, as these major corporations laying off office workers, they're letting their office space go because they don't need it anymore, and there's no one there to rent it to or to lease to at this point. And I saw it when I was in Manhattan, and I was working for a company, and they're moving their operation down to North Carolina. They had buildings that were just sitting there empty because they were moving people away. And it's the same thing that's happening now. The companies are laying off these people. They can't fill the offices anymore. They can't lease it to anyone, and they just remain empty. And the office space percentage is rising now because there are a lot of office space that is no longer filled by these employees. So there are many different signs. If we look all around, we can see them. Now, the back-to-school PC sales seems to be collapsing, and it is the worst since 2008. The 2013 sales quarter experienced its lowest PC volume, and it was really bad. And we saw this during the back-to-school, that Office Max, Office Depot, and all of these stores were reporting very slow sales. They were not doing what they thought they were going to do. Even Costco said that their sales declined. Walmart saying that their back-to-school sales were declining. And what's happening is people are just reusing things and not going out and buying back-to-school clothing, not going out buying back-to-school equipment. They're using what they have at this point instead of going to buy new. Now, speaking of U.S. retailers, we see that L Brands Inc. Was expected to have a 2% gain, but it came in at only 1%. And we see that Gap retail sales is lower than expected. Costco is reporting that most of the consumers are not buying expensive merchandise. They're mostly buying food, and they're not buying the electronics and things like that. JCPenney, well, JCPenney is JCPenney. They're reporting a 4% drop in their retail sales, and JCPenney's doing terribly anyhow. I mean, it's just doing awful. And Rite Aid is reporting a 0.5% drop in their general merchandise, and we're seeing this across the board. And back in February, there was an article in the USA Today where major retailers like Best Buy, Barnes & Noble, Radio Shack, they were all closing retail stores all throughout the year, and they were closing. Each chain was closing hundreds of stores, laying off thousands of people, and this is because there is no sales. People do not have disposable income at this time. Okay, now Americans across the country are crossing the barricades and going into national parks, going into different areas, and what what they're doing is they are practicing civil disobedience, and they are getting fined. They're getting citations because they're crossing over into a closed national park or memorial, and all these people are getting ticketed. And but the people are outraged because most of these closures are absolutely ridiculous. And U.S. Sportsmen's Alliance sent a letter to Barack Obama saying that the lands are generally accessible to the public without special entrance fees, passes through gates, or access via controlled roads or waterways. And what they've done is they set up barricades so they can't even get into the woods. And it makes no sense whatsoever because even though the area is controlled by the federal government, there were no fees. You could have just walked in there, and there's no need to put barricades up to stop people. It makes no sense. The only sense that it does make is to really outrage the people, make them angry. And if you notice, they're closing the memorials, they're closing the national parks, and they're closing websites that everyone needs, but we know they're not really closed down. But they're keeping the golf course open for Congress. They're keeping the gym open for Congress. And we are still sending aid to all the countries like Saudi Arabia, Israel. Well, now we stop with Egypt. But all of these places, they are still sending aid, and that is billions of dollars. And they haven't stopped the funding for Obamacare. I mean, that is going in full force. And what I've just learned is to create that website that has all of these glitches, that doesn't work, where nobody can sign up, and really nobody really wants to sign up because who wants Obamacare? That cost $634 million to create. What a waste of money. Our money. Now, speaking of Obamacare, Indiana is taking Obamacare back to the Supreme Court. They are suing, and Oklahoma is doing the same. They have created a lawsuit, and it's a total of 15 school districts have filed a joint lawsuit against President Obama's Affordable Care Act. And they've gotten together, and they are filing these lawsuits, and they're saying this is not right, and to have penalties against businesses, and also there are penalties against school districts. And what they're doing to avoid these penalties, just like every other business is going to do, is they are cutting hours and eliminating full-time positions, and this is not constitutional. And they go on and on and on, and there's many, many different school districts here that are suing against Obamacare. And this, we'll have to see how this plays out with this lawsuit. And again, I've said this in the past. If someone is forcing you, like the government, forcing you to do something, and if you don't do it, you're punished, it is not for the people. I was thinking about this today, and the senators, Obama, they're all telling us how great Obamacare is. Pelosi, all of them. They're telling us it's incredible. To prove this, they should have been the first ones to go onto the website, apply for Obamacare, and that is their insurance. But what is absolutely amazing about this is that they're all exempt, and they didn't do this. And this just goes to show you that all of these people are exempt because they really don't want it, and that what they're doing is they're saying, well, it's good enough for you people over here, the American people, but we're going to keep what we have because it's much, much better. And it just goes to show you that this is actually really not for the people. And when something is for the people, you don't have to have movie stars out there pushing it. Like I see commercials now of movie stars telling us how great Obamacare is. You do not have to campaign if something is that great. If it is so great and fantastic, there would be no reason to campaign at all because people would pick up on it, they would understand that it is for them, and they would want it. And you wouldn't have to be punished like a child if you didn't take it. And the punishment that I'm talking about is that you are taxed. Businesses are taxed. You are taxed if you don't want it. And we really have to understand is that the insurance companies wrote the core bill of Obamacare. And the insurance companies are the ones who are going to benefit from this because what are they doing? They are forcing everyone to go buy insurance, no matter if you like it or not. You have to. Businesses are now saying, well, you know what? We don't have to insure the husband and the wife because the spouse now can go to Obamacare and get something on the exchange. So now we only have to insure the one person. Businesses now are cutting hours. Businesses now are getting rid of full-time employees. How can this possibly be good for business and for the people when you're forced to do something? It isn't. Okay, now Netanyahu is out there again, and he's telling Europe now that if Iran's sanctions are eased, they will collapse. So with the sanctions, they won't collapse, but if they remove the sanctions, Iran will collapse. It makes no sense whatsoever. But he's saying, and I'll read this to you, if the international community lifts sanctions on Iran without ensuring the guaranteed end to uranium enrichment, Europe will face hundreds of nuclear weapons in the hands of a murderous regime. And he is pushing the propaganda, and he's continually doing this. There was also an Iran dissident saying that Iran is now moving their nuclear weaponization research to a different area. So when the inspectors come in, they will not find the nuclear weapons and the labs. And we can see that they're picking up on, they're pushing this propaganda now because we know something is definitely going to happen. They're pushing this more and more now, and we understand that they're going to use some type of an event to push this war forward because it failed with Syria, and that is on the back burner. But I hate to say it, the grand prize was always Iran. They've been doing this for over 25 years, and over the 25 years they've been saying they're going to have a nuclear weapon within 3 to 5 months, and they kept saying that, and it's been 25 years and they never had one. But they are going to push this because they need to put Iran on the U.S. dollar as the reserve currency because they're selling all their oil bypassing the dollar, and the central bankers will not have this. They need to put a puppet government back into Iran, and they need to set up a private central Western bank because this is their ultimate plan to prop up the U.S. dollar. And we see throughout the Middle East, which is becoming unhinged right now, a little bit hard to control, and they're trying to maintain control with force to keep the U.S. dollar propped up. But once they lose control, the U.S. dollar will come tumbling down. And before that happens, they want to get this war started. Now, we understand that the truckers are moving into D.C., and they're barreling down the highway right now, headed towards it, and they're supposed to arrive tomorrow. And there is claims that the Department of Transportation says that they're ordering the Armed National Guard troops to close Washington, D.C.'s Interstate Route 495 in order to derail a mass protest and potential blockade being organized by a group called Truckers Ride for the Constitution. And we can see what they're doing here. They are trying to make them angry, and I would not be surprised, and this is a perfect opportunity for the government to create a distraction and to really set up some type of false flag for the president to declare a national emergency, to declare martial law, because we have veterans down there, we have truckers down there, and we can see them that they could be pushing this agenda forward, and this is just something to look at now. I'm not saying that it will happen. I'm saying this is something to look to look at, and this could be a potential false flag coming down the line. And we can see the National Guard is being pushed out there to close the 495, which wraps around D.C., and we can definitely see something happening in this area during this weekend. And we have to remember that they would like nothing more to declare a national emergency, so all power goes to the president. He doesn't have to deal with Congress. He doesn't have to deal with these voting. He can just do pretty much what he needs to do, and this could be a perfect opportunity. And we do understand, and I said this yesterday, that there was, Dr. Paul Craig Roberts also said that he could declare a national catastrophe or national emergency if we go past the debt ceiling. And Goldman is out there saying that it's clearly possible that the final resolution might not be reached until shortly after October 17th, which would enable the president to declare a national emergency to keep the continuity of the government working and moving forward. So this could all run into one big type of event that is coming, because it is a perfect opportunity for them to carry this out. And again, we have to remember there are so many different drills happening in a 6-week period that we could see a lot of events happening in this time period. And I picked up on this very interesting news article it was on Channel 2 News Investigation, and this is another potential false flag. And let me read this to you. The 10 news investigators have obtained an internal memo. Koch describes the events of 9/11 as an incredible attack on us. It was very well orchestrated, and they're going to try it again. 100%, no question in my mind. They're going to try it again. According to Koch, many other flight crews are concerned the planning may already be underway. There have been several cases recently throughout the airline industry of what appears to be probes or dry runs to test our procedures and reactions to an in-flight threat. Koch says, what most security experts will tell you that if a dry run is occurring, the attack will shortly follow. They told TSA about this, and TSA said it takes all reports of suspicious activity aboard aircraft seriously, and the matter requires no further investigation at this time. And this is what disturbs me, that they're not going to look into it, and this is throwing up many red flags right here. However, a current federal air marshal who works for flights every week says the TSA, they're liars, they're flat-out liars. The air marshals, whose identity we will not reveal because an agency rules prohibit him from talking to the media, says TSA doesn't want the flying public to be aware of the problems with terrorist probes. As the federal air marshal and industry insider tells us, we're waiting for the next 9/11 to happen, because it's not a question of if, it's a question of when. And I have a link on here. This is from Channel 10 News Investigating Report, and we can see that this could be another potential false flag. I'm going to put this on the X22 Report site. And for those people who are new and just listening and just subscribed on YouTube, or have just come who have never been to the x22report.com site, I always put all the potential false flags on the right-hand side of the home page, so we can see and map out what is happening here. This is a very disturbing investigation, and it shows us that there are plans being made at this time. We know for a fact that there is going to be some type of an event. We saw out in Arkansas that someone attacked the power grid out there, and we saw they left a message, you should have been expecting us, and we can see things are starting to move forward. We have something coming up this weekend. We have many drills coming up, and we understand when we see these drills, usually a false flag is around the drill time period. Doesn't mean there's going to be one, but more than likely something is going to occur. Listen, everyone, be well, be safe, and listen, especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.